Dead bodies are perfectly okay to be around for a while. Notes author Max Alexander. The care of the dead has changed a great deal over the years. In Undertaken with Love, Donna Belk notes how historically families, friends, and neighbors rallied together to help out when a death occurred. Oftentimes, a death doula would assist and organize the women in cleaning and dressing the body, while the men worked to build the coffin, dig the grave, and transport the body. I often get asked this question, why I got involved in the funeral industry. My journey to this line of work was not common. So today I'd like to share with you why I became a funeral director, as well as the benefits of becoming involved personally in the funeral process yourselves. It is my goal to encourage everyone to hold an open mind and heart to saying goodbye on your own terms, and not the terms we've learned to settle with. When my grandmother died, everything stopped as I raced down to Los Angeles, driving through the night. During my drive, I would call several local funeral homes, none of which would allow me to care for my grandmother's remains myself. I finally called up one of my virtual connections from LinkedIn, and he connected me with a funeral director who could help me. Meeting with the funeral director the next afternoon, my family and I were still uncertain about caring for my grandmother. I was anxious to see my grandmother dead because I didn't want to see suffering on her face. But I had a reason with myself. If I could care for everyone else's loved ones in death, why wouldn't I care for my grandmother? Who could care for my grandmother better than me? So with my mother, my mother-in-law, and the lady funeral director, we proceeded. My family and I washed and dressed my grandmother to prepare her for burial. At one point, the other funeral director, the owner of the establishment, came in and said he could prepare my grandmother's body, but we'd have to leave the room. The thought of this man who fit the stereotype of a lurching bearded villain out of a Disney movie preparing my grandmother sickened me. And I believe she deserved my care, not the care of a stranger. Although family-directed funerals take more effort to arrange and carry out, many families feel they are more meaningful and healing than those arranged by a funeral director, says Donna Belk. A home funeral can help people gently integrate the death into their lives. A home funeral offers mourners a sense of control and helps them feel useful. It also enables families to decide how the body is treated. Author Lisa Carlson notes how personal involvement at the time of death is significant and helpful in order to say goodbye to a loved one. I learned about home funerals when I attended a home funeral workshop put on by Crossings, an organization whose goal is to educate the family to be their own funeral director. This new information led me to want to help others, and this drew me to apply to mortuary school so I could do so legally. Shortly after this workshop, Oregon State changed laws making workshops like this one illegal unless performed by a licensed funeral director. This new law also made it so you had to be a licensed funeral director and embalmer to help families carry out a home funeral. Although families can still legally hold a home funeral independently with the help of volunteers, friends, or with the help of a licensed embalmer. To date, Oregon State is the only state in the nation with a law banning hands-on assistance in home funerals by someone without an embalmer's license. And if there's one place where home funerals will become popular, it's here in Portland, Oregon. So the only way to continue my path was to attend mortuary school. I am the first one of a group of people that wanted to help with home funerals to make it through the program. And few are likely to follow because it's opposed to the ideas behind the home funeral movement. I didn't grow up in a funeral home. I wasn't a fan of horror movies. I simply came into this wanting to help people. And the law dictated that to do that, I needed the following. Obtain a 2-year degree from an approved mortuary school, successfully pass 2 national board exams, successfully pass 1 state law exam, work 150 hours as an intern for free, and work another 1,440 hours for 1 year for free as an apprentice, arranging a minimum of 25 funerals and embalming a minimum of 35 bodies. Embalming, something I was initially opposed to when I started my journey, because home funerals don't utilize embalming. I had to do all this to attain the licensure to do the simple task people have been doing for hundreds of years without a licensed embalmer. But I digress. What I remember most about the day we cared for my grandmother was not how my grandmother looked dead, but how the women of the family came together to say goodbye on our own terms. It brought us closer, it made us stronger, and it took us towards our first steps of healing. Something that surprised me was before this day, my mother and mother-in-law did not get along, and they warmed up to each other significantly after working on my grandmother together. This sacred final act bonded them in a way I don't think anything else could. But I'm not here to convince you to become a mortician, and I'm not saying this is right for everyone or every case. My grandfather was a very stoic man who would not have appreciated being bathed and dressed by his daughters. When he died a month later, we arranged full military honors for his final service, including getting him the Presidential Certificate honors. In a manual for home funeral care, Beth Knox notes that the main thing to keep in mind is to consider which aspects of funeral care or memorialization you might like to perform. Talk with funeral homes about their willingness to work with you. Each family makes different choices when it comes to getting involved in the final care of a loved one. Some families have the funeral home just do the paperwork. Some let the funeral home transport the body. Some have a body prepared at the funeral home and then brought home for a vigil. And one hairdresser I met at the funeral home came in to style her mom's hair for the final viewing. It took her a long time to do the work between her tears, but she stopped afterwards to thank us for letting her do it. So regardless of how you choose to get involved in the funeralization process, many resources point to the healing aspects of this work. My goal is that what I have shared with you will encourage you to keep an open mind and consider how you might get involved the next time your family or friends experience a loss. And if after all I've shared with you, you still can't bring yourself to handle your loved one's remains, I'll leave you with one last thought from Max Alexander's Smithsonian article called The Surprising Satisfactions of a Home Funeral. His father's $11,000 funeral, complete with an embalming, a full church service, a metal coffin, and cemetery plot burial, felt shallow and empty, while his father-in-law's home funeral, which he took part in, was a life-changing experience that he found immensely more meaningful than the funeral his father had, and the cost was only $450. So I urge you to please give it some thought. Thank you.